topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday morning, and I'm so excited to be here with you. I just want to share I'm traveling and not in my usual space. So there may be a little bit disconnect, but I know you are patient with me. We love you and you all love me. So it's all good. I want to share a very unique kindness story with you. So as I was traveling from North Carolina to New York, at the airport, there was this mom. She had a huge stroller and a couple of kids. And as I was approaching to her, just kind of to check if I could help her out, what was interesting was that her 5-year-old tapped his mama's leg and looked up to her, and they had some conversation. And what was interesting was that he guided her how to go through. It was just fascinating. I just took a step back, and it's amazing. Like, you can have that kindness for somebody in your family as well. So thank you to everyone who have got our books. If you have not, take a moment and check out our books and get it, because we do share part of the profits with kiva.org. And let's welcome our guest, Karl Schlegel. Welcome, Karl.
Thank you, Divya.
So, Karl, you bring a wealth of experience across VC, family office, M&A, tech, and startups to drive 7 to 9 figure value increase through plug and play, strategic partnerships, and executive access. So, very impressive journey. So usually the journey begins when you are a child. We all start there. So do you recall a moment or a person that left a positive mark on you, either in your childhood or in your youth?
Yeah, absolutely. My father has had a major impact on me. My father was born with a physical disability. So, but he made up for it in terms of personality and the way in which he could build relationships, build trust, be able to create unforgettable memories and experiences. And that's something that's really left an impact on me. And the work that I do today, as far as strategic partnerships, executive access, really focuses in on the relationships. I would also say that my father was one who encouraged me to dream and to think beyond the box, or even think beyond, the earth. So when I was about 2 years old, I really had the dream of becoming an astronaut. I wanted to explore. I wanted to move beyond the bounds of the earth. And later on, many years later, when I was part of the Rocket Racing League, running merchandising and apparel, I got to get closer to that vision, as this was a NASCAR in the skies type racing league, where the pilots would fly through these tracks that they would see in the sky in their heads-up display like a video game, and people at home could actually be able to race against them. And the plan was eventually to go to suborbital races and really be able to drive exploration forward. So my father planting those seeds, watching Star Trek with me, encouraging me to think outside of the traditional career routes, as well as the opportunities, has left an impact on me in so many different ways.
Yeah. And you brought up a really, really good point, that rather than the traditional career routes. There are so many things that we can explore. And talking about Star Trek, I'm a Trekkie too. So as you grew up, where did your life take you?
My life took me in a lot of different directions, I could say. On the one hand, when I was younger, I was more comfortable speaking with adults, more comfortable speaking about science and just different things. I felt like I wanted to grow up faster, right? And I felt as though I didn't fit into my, into my peer group. And then I discovered the wonder of play. And so I really started then kind of settling in, and through sports, through playing team sports like roller hockey. I was in a roller hockey league where I got to play basketball on my freshman basketball team. I was the Rudy of the team, quite literally. I mean, like even in practice, the coach would kind of play against us and rough us up. And man, it was intense. But these types of experiences, and then being able to step into opportunities to invite other people into the play or thinking beyond, I kind of found my own waterline, so to speak, and my own group of people, and yet found the ability to also cross over into a lot of different other categories. So life on the one hand kind of became, 5-year-old Karl was looking to be an adult. If you asked me at 10 years old what I wanted to do, I would tell you I wanted to have 5 different businesses, from car design and boat design and building rockets and all kinds of things. But then, team sports and different things in terms of school helped to pull me back into my peer group, to be able to find my love of music, not just from the violin, but from experiencing that with other people who are my age, and then, being able to iterate. So at one point, I was with a friend of mine who introduced me to Bob Marley on the one hand, right? And he's a guitarist, and my buddy Justin could play like Jimi Hendrix. I mean, he was amazing. And on the violin, I was going, I'm classically trained, but I really, really, really want to do that. I was trying to figure out how I could do that. And at the same time, in his concrete basement, he's teaching me how to break dance, right? So you talk about the world colliding in different types of areas, and that freedom, really to explore and to be able to try different things, I think was really the path that helped me, not just from my father's influence, but also then finding that level within my peer group, and while still not giving up the desire for imagination and for reinvention or coming at things from a different way.
Yeah, that is really powerful, because what I'm hearing is that because you were exposed to so many different things, you gathered that experience. And that experience makes your life not only richer, but it also helps your brain to expand and look at that vision and see where the invention or reinvention could happen. So how did you get into VC?
That's a really funny story. The truth of the matter is that I kind of insulted my way into VC, if it really comes down to it. And what I mean by this was I was so green at the time. There was an opportunity that we were putting together, and it involved being able to take a look at water supplies in the Northeast. Coca-Cola, Nestle, they were having trouble getting water supplies. So I had been working on another project, WebEx meets Skype, and being able to deliver continuing medical education to doctors and nurses sponsored by pharmaceuticals. And one of the people who was involved in a little bit in that process from the ancillary introduced me at that time to very, very powerful magnets, and as well as to this need for additional water sources to be able to help supply Coca-Cola and others. So long story short, I brought in a venture capitalist and an angel investor to be able to take a look at the opportunity. And when we found that we hit a roadblock where there was a concern about, instead of having a freshwater aquifer, that there could actually be an issue with being on environmentally protected land, in my mind, I was like, no problem. So I had already been having conversations with a company that was looking to take water from glaciers over in Norway and bring it over into the United States. So transporting water from glaciers. And I was like, that's okay. Here's plan B. So the situation with the venture capitalist, he goes, look, we're going to do this deal with you, and we're going to be really generous. This is normally not what we really do. And I turned around to him and I said, no, this is supply and demand, right? I'm so green. I said, this is a 50-50 deal, supply and demand. Here we go. And so he says to me, he said, kid, you got style and you got a lot of, he said, we'll work on that a little bit. But it led to me then getting an opportunity to be involved in venture capital. And it was quite an adventure from there. So the relationship aspect and just being present and stuff, even more so than the traditional route, right, is what has opened up so many doors in life, as well as advising, a foreign government on strategic commodities reserves or other things that have come up in my life. Really being present and aware of the dynamics, but also looking at the exchange of value has been a game changer.
Absolutely. And anytime, any interaction is an exchange of value. When that happens, you're building relationships. So talking about relationships, what can Henry Ford teach us about strategic partnerships?
Henry Ford was once on trial, and he was being accused of not being a smart man. And what was amazing is that he turns around and he tells the judge in the court, and he says, I might not know everything, but I've got a row of buttons on my desk. And I know if I press these buttons, the people that have the information, will be able to come in and be able to supply that, right? And this was instrumental. What I saw from this is that sometimes we think that we have to know everything. We have to understand how everything works, and we can fall into this trap of only seeing from our own perspective. Instead of the plug and play philosophy is instead of trying to reinvent the wheel or try to see things only from our own image, likeness, our own perspective, how are we able to collaborate with others who have that knowledge, that expertise in a way that's not threatening, but in a way that actually builds up both and both come out better for it in the process? And so that story from Henry Ford is something that has made an impact on me, kind of when I'm feeling like, oh no, do I understand everything? Do I have all the lingo down, et cetera? Of being able to step back, to relax, to step into the team modality and say, I don't need to have all the answers. If I'm surrounded by the right people and we have the right structures that allow us to be able to collaborate, we're all going to be able to help each other in this process.
Absolutely. There's nothing like doing things together. And talking about the different types of teams, so what would you say is I know you talk about building SWAT teams. So
Yes.
Share with us what is a SWAT team and why is creativity important in building those?
So when I take a look at a SWAT team, I think of a rapid deployment force where individuals have been specifically picked for different types of capabilities. But one of the things that a Navy SEAL had actually shared with me, he said, Karl, for all the training and everything that we go through, he said the real breakthrough is one around leadership. And what does this mean? Navy SEALs have the unique ability, he shared with me, to be leaders as well as followers at the same time. So whoever in the team actually understands what direction to take, the others fall in line and follow. And yet each comes with their areas of expertise. Each also has been an understudy for other situations or scenarios that could come up where they might have to step in and assume certain responsibilities or roles. And so when I take a look at SWAT teams, it's not just a collection of professionals who are very competent and expert at what it is that they do. It's also a philosophy of being able to support each other, to move as one, to move as a unit, to be able to have each other's backs, and to then be able to collaborate, to understand the environment, to work together, but to be leaders as well as followers. When I was at an artificial intelligence company, we put together SWAT teams that would go in next to development teams and help them get over the finish line faster. Now, I've been part of organizations where sometimes it can feel as though there's a tension between providing that support, but also saying we can do it better. And that's the other thing with the SWAT team, especially from the Navy SEAL paradigm, is being able to be confident and present so that you actually take arrogance out of the equation. You increase presence and you're able to really address the situation at hand while leaving the ego out of it. So that's where the SWAT teams really come into play. More recently, there have been opportunities, or across my career, there have been opportunities to take teams that were collaborating with each other, but might be described as quote unquote broker chains. Because I think that there's a fallacy of the person in the middle. The person in the middle doesn't really have the ability or the authority to be able to get something done. It couldn't be further from the truth. When you actually have a group that comes together as a unit, now people can't get around them, but it's not about blocking an opportunity for moving forward. It's about facilitating and allowing those that need to be in certain positions to have the ability to back channel and to be able to get things done. And I've seen how these SWAT teams can be very, very powerful, very influential, and actually gain respect as a unit more so than any one individual would necessarily receive in a similar type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the beauty of it, that when you have a cohesive team, and I always kind of think about the rowers, when people are coming together in the rowing teams, they're all rowing towards the same direction. And in that, there is no follower, there's no leader. It's just one cohesive unit. And there is such a beauty in it. There's a power in it that helps them move forward. So let's say, you are building these SWAT teams, they're amazing. And yet we're talking about human beings. There is an interplay of emotion, and there is, to some times, there may be some team dynamics involved where people are not able to work with each other. So how would you go about de-risking human behavior when you're building strategic partnerships?
That's a great question, Divya. And I've been fortunate to be part of opportunities that had potentially very large payouts, but there was also the understanding that if people couldn't get along, you might as well just tear up the paperwork. It doesn't matter what you've got on paper at the table, right? You really see up front how contracts are only as good as those people and the values that they actually hold behind that, and their intent to be able to really collaborate and have that value exchange. When it comes to de-risking, I take a look at the personalities first and foremost, but I also take a look at how are we able to understand the motivations of each person on an individual basis. So when people think of vision boards, right, they think of these boards where you put everything that you want to have happen to manifest, and you're activating this and pulling this towards you. When I think about vision boards with teams, I think of things in a radial. You put the objective or the goal of the team at the center. And then from those, you have these areas, kind of like the rays of the sun that are coming out that have the individuals around them, their picture. And then further out, you have what is their motivating, driving goal that they want to be able to achieve? How are you able to make this personal? Because when each person understands what it is that they're fighting for, that allows them to be able to lean in and to be able to support each other. And when the team understands what each individual is fighting for, as well as what the team goal is, this helps to de-risk and de-escalate. The other thing that I would say is, when coming to the table, having rules of the road. So processes and procedures around engagements, you have these in commodities, you have these in bankings, you have these in various types of institutions. It's the ambiguity that can lead to the disconnects. But when you actually have clear processes and procedures, rules of the road, you invite the conflict up front, but in a way in which it's outside of the spotlight, so that you can work and deal with things. Instead of pushing things aside or artificially suppressing, you're actually allowing the humanity to be able to be first and foremost, to people to remember that these are human beings that are collaborating together, that there are going to be disagreements, and that you're going to need a mechanism for working through those. And when you have deals between parties, those processes and procedures allow people to come back to a middle ground, or to be able to say, okay, maybe this is where we went wrong. So instead of suppressing these things, being able to understand what are the individual motivations, what are the motivations of each group, clear processes and procedures like the rules of the road that are in place, and then being able to have a forum that allows for getting the conflict out in a constructive way, as opposed to having it become hidden or having a passive aggressive nature take place, where things that are being said, there's really some other meaning that's taking place. No, we need to be able to get that out in the forefront. So I'd say that these things really can help to de-escalate the risk around collaboration and partnerships, and allow each person to step into who they fully are in contributing and also benefiting and being part of these.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. And when you're talking about processes and procedures, so these kind of step into and lead into, like, you're building systems around it, and there is data. You're building the data as you're building the teams. So as these systems are evolving, how do they impact as to evolving business models?
That's a great question, Divya. What we're seeing today in a pre-COVID world was that everything kind of came back to the documents. If you were talking about certain procedures, it said, do you have the document? Do you have the original stamped document? What are you able to show in terms of originality that says this is the document, this is the process by which we're taking a look at? In a post-COVID world, we've seen how digitization has been rushing forward. Now we've got a situation between documents, data, systems of record, and figuring out whose watch or whose system do we actually tell time by, right? Where are we connecting these things back? What we've seen is the rise of real world asset tokenization conversations. And I think taking a step back from this can sound very mystical. Okay, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency. Is there anything that's really going on here? But if we actually take a step back, tokenization has been taking place for a long time. Authorization of tokens in payment processing is not something that's new. So how are you authenticating the data? How are you taking a look at the exchange? Well, the documents, the data systems of record, as they all kind of come together, the ability to connect those pieces and to be able to draw lines between who's liable, who's responsible, where could the potential value get extracted from, is something that opens up new opportunities around business models. So I've been a co-inventor in a patent around tracking and analysis of worker performance on blockchain. One of the contributions was even taking a look at nanomaterials as read-in mechanisms into the data stream. What this does is this allows all those systems and the processes and the data to be able to come together, and for you to be able to create a clear connection and a line tracing back to who is impacted, who has touched this, how is everything being able to move forward. And at the same time, this can also show opportunities between components that you may not have thought about before in terms of how they impact risk or how they impact opportunity, and factoring those into additional business models and opportunities to be able to really find additional value. One area, just quickly, is tokenization of in-ground assets, for example, keeping gold in the ground, tokenizing that gold, but bringing the value into the markets or other types of commodities. The models in the market have been based on an extraction-based model, but then the gold bar only becomes the gold bar trading at a certain level. By keeping the gold in the ground and being able to surface the value into the market, now all of a sudden there's different ways of being able to exchange, being able to open up opportunities, and also being able to lower risk. Keeping the gold in the ground actually keeps it safer. It's safer for different countries. It's safer for the mining operations, et cetera. So that's just one example. But if you found that gold was all of a sudden later on necessary for mining water from asteroids, what you would find is that the preserved future potential value of the gold in the ground would now mean that the gold appreciated in value significantly more than if it was actually extracted out of the ground. So it allows us to take a look at relationships between different types of asset classes, the people that are involved in that, in a different manner, and see how we can track, trace, de-risk, but also be able to look at other ways to trade and exchange value around those assets.
Definitely. It's very powerful. So your example really resonated with me, that keeping that gold in the ground and you're still extracting the value. So what I'm seeing is that by doing the tokenization and having these record keeping, what we are able to see is not only we are able to connect the dots, but we are able to see the possibilities where we would not have been able to see. So one of the questions that comes to my mind is that, are you also able to pinpoint problems using the real world asset tokenization?
That's a great question. I would say that you can identify weaknesses that could be present, such as in the supply chain. There's been a lot of conversation around the Drug Supply Chain Safety Act and being able to make sure that counterfeit medicine isn't getting into our supply chain and making people sick or even die. Medical misdiagnosis is the third leading cause of death in the United States. So there's a real impact when you actually get the data or if you misinterpret the data and where in which that's going to actually lead to, it can lead to a set of unintended consequences. So we also have to be careful about the kinds of data that we're looking at and the parameters that we're using to be able to accomplish this. So with AI, for example, there's been a lot of conversation around efficiency, but is an efficiency model really going to maximize quality of life and keep the humans in the loop, so to speak, keep the humans thriving? Or is it going to actually shift us out of the equation? In a similar way, when taking a look at the tracking and tracing of supply chains or the identification of weaknesses or problems, when we understand in context the data and who's touching the data or who's touching the elements of the supply chain, it does allow us to be able to strengthen those areas. There was a major issue with a military contractor and counterfeit parts. With our IP and the inclusion of nanomaterials into there, you could actually have an inherent barcode inside the molecular structure of the parts, of the gold bar, of the, even around diamonds and being able to protect the Kimberley process when it comes to diamonds, as well as food and other areas, to be able to make sure this is something that's authorized, this is something that's going to be safe, and being able to track back and say, where are the weaknesses? Where are the potential problems? How are we able to support that? The last thing that I would say is, as we look at space, the authority to operate in space, just because we could 3D print a rocket in space, do we actually have the authority to be able to do it? This comes back to a number of documents, data systems of record, and who actually said that you're able to do it. These are areas that someone could say, well, there's a lot of bureaucracy that could take place around this, or how are we able to streamline the process and yet still be able to maintain the regulatory safeguards that are necessary so that we have a certain place, those rules of the road, so to speak, from which to be able to trust.
Yeah, no, very powerful, because it's important to anticipate issues before they even arise, because it's easier to prevent rather than going and fixing the solution. So definitely, it sounds like your IP and your technology is very, very powerful. And as you're talking, what's coming to my mind is that, how do you build ecosystems around this?
That's a great question. Ecosystems, they say, over the next 5 years are going to have the single biggest impact in shifting business models moving forward. There's data from Accenture, there's data from HubSpot out there that supports this. But what really comes back to ecosystems? I recently moderated some private executive roundtables, and in opening up the conversation about cross-border payments, what we really talked about was that this is all about trust, right? And there's this big conversation that's taking place around AI and trust. What I'm seeing right now is that relationships, the trust that's been built in the trenches, from rolling up your sleeves, from solving problems together, from breaking bread, from having real person, real life interactions, can't replace the ability for AI to say, you should go and speak with Divya because Divya holds this capability and here's how to structure the deal, et cetera, et cetera. There's still a notion that comes back to, but can I trust you? How do I know that I can trust you? How do I know that this is not just a deep fake scenario? With everything that's going on today, even around technology, that's become a real concern. For all we know, we could be having a conversation here and it could be our avatars speaking and they're not authorized to speak on our behalf, right? So it's kind of crazy. That's not the case, of course. But that's also opening up different areas. So when we think about ecosystems, it's really showing us how the connectivity between so many things, the cause and effect and the impacts really are happening. At the same time, generally there are people who are in charge of these different ecosystems. So what I like to say is you can go and put your fishing pole in the stream, you know that the fish are there, or you can go and become friends with the person at the dam, make the right kind of deal, the opportunity that's beneficial for both, and get all the fish that you want, right? People who are at the head of these different ecosystems, because of their service to the community, because of the trust that's been engendered in the community, they become the mechanisms through which that trust transfers. So when you can think about how things are connected and you can seek out those who already have the trust of different communities and are leading different communities, it creates a different energy. Instead of going and building a community, let's say, you can go and partner with people who already have the trust in the community, discuss the values that you share, find the common ground. And instead of having to go all the way 12 steps backward just to be able to move 2 forward, what you can find is that you can leap 12 steps ahead because of being able to do this. So ecosystem mindset, ecosystem thinking about collaboration and the creative as opposed to the competitive when looking at the landscapes, the blue oceans versus the red oceans, and even looking at the nature of the quote unquote competitors and competition in a very different way can open up those opportunities for collaboration. We're seeing that between major tech companies that are collaborating that normally would have been quote unquote enemies in the market. And yet there's a certain understanding as everything moves forward that it's a force that is stronger or bigger and outweighs any individual company, any individual. So there's almost a need for survival and to be able to transcend the type of wave that's coming upon us for that type of collaboration. So ecosystems and thinking from an ecosystem standpoint can allow you to capture the relationship value, can allow you to be able to capture the trust, can also allow you to be able to then take a look at the systems that are being built around regulating that trust, that exchange of value, that transfer. And I think that's what we're really seeing around real world asset tokenization, that we're seeing around digitization that's going on today, is everybody's asking that question. How does this make us better? We have to collaborate. It's a global world today. How are we able to do this in a way that preserves the value, that preserves our own ethics, and even preserves the ethnicities of those that are being involved?
Yeah, you bring up a very, very good point over here, that how do we preserve that? And you've talked about the trust. And that trust is so critical because it's so fragile. Like once broken, it's very, very hard to earn it back. And you need to put in a lot of effort to even earn it in the first place. So when we are talking about trust, it brings us to the governance. And so what would you say is that, like, if you have an AI board member and it's coming, I mean, and I'm seeing it a lot in my interactions, how will that lead to better governance? Or not?
That is a question that definitely causes me to pause, as I'm sure it causes many other people to pause. Do we trust in an equal capacity an artificial intelligence with having a vote, or even just being able to supply that information to be able to take a vote at a board level? And you're right, it's coming. I think what it goes back to, though, is factoring in the different perspectives into the decisions that are being made, taking a position where you factor in different points of view, different values into the equation, so that you really are able to get something that's holistic and representative of not only the internal workings of the company or the culture that you have, but also are able to understand the potential interaction between other cultures and other types of environments. At a certain point, I worked with Michael Sikora, who led Project Socrates, the all-source intelligence program out of the White House under President Reagan. I worked with him in the private sector. And one of the things that he had shared is he felt that moving from the industrial revolution to the automated innovation revolution, it was going to be very important as we looked at different types of systems and processes and procedures. And he could map out technology space for the next 100 years, have been doing it on behalf of the government and taking a look at where the gaps were. But when taking a look at this, it was also going to be important to make sure that the systems had included the sensitivity, right, to the different values and the processes, including religious, for example, right? We don't think of religious perhaps necessarily in terms of having an impact in the socioeconomic space, yet it does in further reaching ways than we might actually realize. And so when you factor these into the protocols at that board level, now you're not only equipped to make decisions that make sense internally for your company, but you're also equipped to be able to make decisions and create bridges with others that are going to be interfacing. If you leave that out of the equation, as we said, it's coming, and you're only thinking about yourself, eventually I think you can find yourself in a situation where you're surrounded by others, you're isolated, you're alone, and you've lost your ability to be able to build off of trust or off of even history and experiences that you once were able to do. So the AI at the board level, I think, takes on a whole different connotation than just one that's internal to guide the directions of the company toward profit, toward multiples, toward increase of value for shareholders. But it really needs to be thought of, or would benefit from being thought of, as an ambassador, as an extension, and being able to factor in a lot more of the outside, going back to the ecosystems that we discussed.
Definitely, very insightful. And what you shared about bringing in different perspectives and bringing in different people and also factoring in different parameters that could have an impact. So not only from outside in, but from inside out. So definitely very, very powerful. And that really brings us to the point, especially with the AI. It is as powerful as the data that we train it on. So if we factor in those unconscious biases and a lot of different things that create mistrust, we can create a very powerful AI board member. And of course, it's important to keep on checking and seeing how it's evolving and learning, because it's not static. It's also evolving. So some really, really great points over there. And what would you say, as we get closer to the wrapping up the show, that where is going to be the destination for you and for your IP, and where would you like to see it go?
I have thought about this quite a bit. I look at the IP taking us back into exploration of the stars. I see the IP being able to unite humanity and being able to take a look at the individual essence of the human person. In the Africa Future Summit in 2020, I got a chance to deliver a talk on cognitive diversity and talking about not just people as a contributor to GDP, but the essence of every human being factored in, regardless of whether there was a contribution to GDP, has an impact, a network effect on the rest of the population around the globe. There's been a lot of conversation and concern about IQ levels and how are people able to make decisions. What I see is the opportunity to shift the narrative from one about defending territories, etc., to one about collaboration and exploration, where we're able to bring the best parts of humanity forward, where we're able to look beyond the traditional areas. My father once said to me, look, son, he said, if you are not finding that the problems of the world are being solved, then maybe it's time to go to the streets, to find the people that are not being factored into the equation, that are not being included, to bring them into the equation. Each person here has a piece of the puzzle. Each person here has human dignity and essence, regardless of their contribution to GDP. Therefore, and having a father who grew up with a physical handicap and a disability, it really allowed me to experience that. And I've thought about it a lot later. And my father compensated in a lot of other areas. I mean, he could hold court with the best of them. He loved to throw parties. He was the person that people who have since been governor of New Jersey, right, once came and asked him what his thoughts were in our driveway, right? It's amazing to see that. And yet, if people are given that opportunity to contribute, to thrive, I think that can really open up, a whole new perspective and area. So that is what I see the potential for being able to do, is to have people factored into the equation, to have people included, have people celebrated, and to find and discover new ways of collaboration, even among people that would be considered competitors. Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, instead of the patent cliff and trying to fight each other and get into different areas, what if you could actually come up with new breakthroughs or other types of industries that would normally be seen as competitive to each other and trying to play a scarcity-based position, instead of having a way to say, here's how we can both win together. We both get our contributions recognized, and here's how we create new breakthroughs in moving forward. That is my hope for the IP that we have, and being able to bring additional balance, additional opportunity out. And the gold tokenization is just an example. Keep the gold in the ground, keep the minerals in the ground, bring that value into the market. That starts shifting the trajectories of cash poor countries that are mineral rich, and the way in which collaboration on an equal basis or the fair value exchange can start also taking place.
Yeah, definitely resonates, because I'm all about humanity and connecting people and having a bright dawn where it's not just one, but everyone matters. And we are taking everyone with us, with looking out for all. So, and it really hit home to me, because in my TED Talk, that's what I focus on, that each and every one of us can have our cakes and we can celebrate each other's cakes also. So what you're sharing is very beautiful. Karl, tell us if you have any last thoughts for our audience. Where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Divya, it's been a pleasure being on the show today. What I would say is keep a lookout for the company Decentralized Value. That's where we're taking this IP, and we're really moving things forward in an exciting way. And there's a lot of things that are on the horizon there. You can find me at linkedin.com/in/Karl Schlegel, my name. That's a great way to be able to connect. And Renovatio actually is a Latin word that means renewal or rebirth. And so Renovatio is about a mission to be able to bring renewal, to think about things in the non-traditional type of sense, to think about things from the place of human collaboration, authentic human collaboration, and to also open up additional opportunities. And our goal is to be able to create $1 trillion of economic impact in being able to drive these strategic partnerships and these ecosystems and be able to put people together. So I would just ask that if you're thinking about things in your own businesses or your career or how people around you factor in, instead of looking at it and saying, these are the 5, they're the only ones that have utility, I invite you to look at people in a different light, in a different perspective, and see the beauty, the value, the ways in which they impact you. I think the Japanese culture has it very interestingly. The person who's the janitor as well as the CEO gets the same level of respect in certain types of situations. And because there's a recognition of the contribution that each creates within the ecosystem and the balance and the way in which things are able to move forward and thrive. My request is that together we are able to create that future, that we're able to come from a place that's not limited by scarcity, but really reaches into the power that each of us hold inside and brings human abundance to bear in a way that 1,000x's any of the economic, socio, or other types of factors in terms of quality of life moving forward.
Beautiful, Karl. And I really, really wish you the best from my heart, that may your words come true, and we are able to bring this abundance in our humanity and just opening up our hearts and connecting, because at the end of the day, we all are looking for one thing: happiness and joy, and being happy with our family. So why not? So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom and nuggets so openly and sharing your heart. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, lovely audience, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us. Let us know, how can we support you? How can we bring in experts and stories so that you can live the life you deserve and have your dreams come true? And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.